Imagine walking into an important meeting, ready to make a difference, but being treated as if you were invisible. Has this ever happened to you? Perhaps you have felt that despite your effort and dedication, your value was simply not recognized. What if I told you that prejudice can be one of the most dangerous barriers, and that it often appears where we least expect it, within ourselves? This is the starting point of a powerful and dramatic story about overcoming, where a brilliant executive, initially humiliated and ignored, transforms the destiny of an entire company. But the turnaround doesn't happen the way you imagine. The protagonist of this story shows us how, rather than responding with anger or revenge, humility and altruism can be the strongest tools for inspiring true change. Andre, the underrated man, chooses to face prejudice head-on, and what he reveals in the end not only changes the views of his colleagues, but also challenges each of us to rethink how we treat others. Do you want to know what he did to turn the tide and transform the company? Get ready for a journey full of drama, life lessons, and a twist that will leave you thinking, what if that happened to me? If this story has made you reflect and think about how you can deal with similar situations, don't stop here. Do you want to help us buy more tools to improve videos? Help us by subscribing to the channel right now to follow more inspiring stories that can transform your vision of leadership, overcoming, and inclusion. Join a community that values growth and respect. Let's walk together towards a future of opportunities and transformation. Andre entered the meeting room with a calm expression, but tension was in the air. The sound of their heels echoed around the room as the executive's eyes didn't even look up from their notes. He might as well be invisible. There, at that moment, a man about to change the destiny of that company was reduced to insignificance. His impeccable clothes and the shine of his leather briefcase failed to break the barrier of prejudice that hung over him. The silence of the room, however, hid something powerful: Andre's determination, an unshakable strength that he had not yet revealed. Time seemed to drag by. The feeling of injustice was present, but Andre knew that his time would come. Life often tests our patience before offering the opportunity to overcome. The blank stares of the other executives spoke louder than any words could. It was as if Andre wasn't there, as if he didn't matter. Those minutes of indifference were like small stakes driven into his pride, and yet he held firm. He knew that great turnarounds are not born from despair, but from confidence in one's own worth. What they still didn't understand was that the most ignored person in that room was also the most crucial to the future of that company. Andre, however, was unfazed. He had already been through similar situations and knew that, as in any drama, the turning point would come. The feeling of discomfort was beginning to spread throughout the room, but it wasn't because of Andre. What the other executives didn't know was that that silence would be the basis for one of the biggest revelations they would ever witness. Andre watched every movement, every word spoken with disdain, every gesture of arrogance disguised as power. He knew the game well, but chose not to participate in the way they expected. Every second of indifference fueled him, and deep down he knew the time to turn that humiliation into inspiration was approaching. A turning point was about to happen, and Andre was prepared for it. As the minutes passed, the executives began to debate important issues for the company's future, but always with a slight distraction. The quiet man in the corner of the room. He looked out of place. Or maybe they just wanted it that way. Somewhere in the back of their minds, a doubt was beginning to form. Who was that man who watched everything without saying a word? They didn't know it yet, but the power of that invisible presence was beginning to disrupt the usual dynamics of the meeting. The drama was already underway. Arrogant words and hasty decisions began to fly around the room. Suggestions of budget cuts, postponed projects. Andre remained calm, but internally he knew that direction was wrong. They were blinded by their own prejudices and unable to see the true path to the solution. But Andre knew that humility is a rare quality in situations like this, and he was about to use that to his advantage. The power of silence was his weapon at that moment. After all, those who don't say anything are often the ones who have the most to say. Finally, someone asked a question, something related to a proposal that clearly wasn't well thought out. Andre had the perfect opportunity to intervene. but he preferred to wait a little longer. There was something to be learned in that chaos. He watched as the other executives tangled with their own poorly structured ideas. It was almost a lesson in humility to watch everything up close, to see how a lack of vision can destroy a promising project. However, instead of attacking or correcting, Andre preferred to listen more, observe more. He knew that when he spoke, he would get all the attention he had been denied at the beginning. Every decision others made without consulting him seemed to lead the company down an even more difficult path. It was as if they were building a barrier between themselves and success, and Andre was the only one capable of seeing the solution. He could have interrupted, said what he knew, and uncovered the truth. But he waited. A leader's overcoming does not come from impulsive speeches, but from calculated actions. Andre knew his revelation would have a greater impact if he waited for the right moment, and that moment was approaching, like silent thunder about to break the sky. As the tension in the room reached its peak, the air became almost palpable. Everyone was immersed in their own discussions, but there was a silence that grew around Andre. It was as if, unconsciously, everyone knew something was about to happen. He felt it, like an actor who is seconds away from appearing on stage. The twist was about to begin, and he would be the protagonist of that act. With each passing minute, his presence became more noticeable, despite the fact that he hadn't said a single word until that moment. The boardroom was their stage, and the drama was about to unfold. Andre finally took a deep breath and looked around. That room, those people, represented much more than a simple meeting. They were a reflection of a society that still judges by appearances, that still puts prejudices ahead of true competence. But now it was his turn to turn the tables, to show that humility and altruism were the true keys to success. The time for being silent was over. The transformation would begin there, at that moment. Andre, as prepared and confident as he was instantly reduced to an insignificant role by the looks that judged him at first glance. It wasn't the first time he had gone through something like this, but the pain of prejudice still hit him hard. The silence he received upon entering the room was like an unspoken sentence. He knew that the judgment did not come from his competence, but from the superficiality with which many still see the world. Here he was, the man with the vision that could save the company, treated as if he had no value. But Andre, instead of succumbing to frustration, kept his head up. I knew that the power of true leadership lies in overcoming these invisible barriers. Sitting in the back of the room, Andre watched the faces of his colleagues, each more distracted than the last, all focused on their own agendas. None of them could have imagined that the silent man, the one being ignored, was the missing piece of the company's puzzle. The irony was almost unbearable. As they discussed cost cuts and projects at risk, Andre kept his thoughts focused on the solution. He knew that soon the opportunity to prove himself would arise. The prejudice he suffered at that time did not define him, but it would be a powerful tool for the dramatic turn that was to come. Prejudice often acts like a veil, blinding people to the true potential around them. And that day, that meeting, the veil was thick. Executives talked about innovation, but they didn't see the innovation that was in front of them. Andre knew this was one of the greatest ironies of the corporate world. The person most prepared to lead is often the one least expected. He wasn't just another employee. He was the man with the answers everyone was looking for, and the fact that he was ignored only increased the weight of his future revelation. The turnaround was getting closer, and Andre was ready to surprise everyone. Andre always believed that humility and overcoming were inseparable. Being humble for him meant understanding that the prejudice of others should not define his self-esteem, but rather reinforce his conviction that he was on the right path. There in that room, he watched the wrong decisions being made, felt the drama intensify with each word. It was almost like watching a tragedy foretold. But Andre wouldn't act yet. He would wait for the right moment. Humility taught him that sometimes you have to endure injustice before you can act wisely. The discussions continued. With each new proposal, Andre saw solutions that no one else could see. But when he tried to speak, he was cut off or ignored. It was evident that others judged him by his appearance, by where he came from, and not by his ideas. How many times does this happen in life? How often do people fail to hear a valuable opinion because they are stuck in their own limited perceptions? Andre knew that this was the reality for many, and that was why he was determined to change that situation, not just for himself, but for everyone who faced the same type of discrimination on a daily basis. When Ricardo, the marketing director, interrupted him once again, Andre felt his blood boil, but he maintained his composure. He knew that anger wouldn't solve anything. Instead, he took a deep breath, controlling his frustration. I knew that the true power of a turnaround lay in the ability to control emotions, to wait for the exact moment to act. This was a test, not just of his patience, but of his character. Andre's altruism was in his vision beyond himself, in his desire to transform that corporate environment, even when no one believed in him. The conversation continued, full of wrong ideas and dead ends, but Andre didn't give up. He knew that overcoming was not just about overcoming challenges, but about being patient and strategic. His presence, although ignored, was a statement in itself. He was there to prove that prejudice would not be an obstacle to his ascension. But as any good screenwriter knows, the drama needs to intensify before the big reveal happens. And Andre was prepared for that moment. He knew his time was coming, and the surprise would be overwhelming. The truth is that prejudice can blind even the brightest minds. These executives, who took so much pride in their positions and decisions, were about to see how much they had underestimated Andre. The humility with which he behaved was not a sign of weakness, but of inner strength. He understood that true leadership does not come from titles or positions, but from the ability to see beyond the obvious, to recognize value where no one else sees it. He had already overcome many barriers in life, and he knew that this was just another one. What others called weakness, he saw as an opportunity to inspire and transform. With each passing minute, the drama intensified. Andre listened, reflected, and took mental note of everything that was being said. He knew he would soon have the chance to show that, despite being judged by his appearance, it was his vision and competence that would make the difference. Altruism guided his actions. He wasn't just there to prove something to himself, but to change the mindset of everyone around him. When the final revelation happened, it would be a moment of inspiration for everyone, a lesson in how prejudice can blind us to true potential. The room fell silent when Andre finally stood up. All eyes, which had previously ignored him, now turned to him with a mixture of surprise and confusion. It was as if no one expected the quiet man, almost invisible until then, to have anything to say. But he had, and a lot. Suspense was in the air. Andre straightened his tie, his movement precise and calculated, as if he was preparing for a decisive moment. And it was. Without raising his voice, he began to speak, his firm but calm voice echoing through the room. The words that came out of his mouth had the weight of someone carrying a clear and powerful vision. The executives' expressions varied. Some frowned, others looked disconcerted, as if they were being brought out of a trance. Andre, until then treated as a mere subordinate, now presented himself as someone in control of the situation. He talked about mistakes made, about missed opportunities. But it wasn't just a criticism. Every word was loaded with solutions, with ideas that could transform the company. Andre was revealing a new perspective, something no one else had considered. It was as if, suddenly, they were listening to someone completely different, someone capable of guiding the company's future. The silence that dominated the room after his first words was deafening. Andre knew he had everyone's attention now. He moved slowly around the room, making eye contact with each executive, showing that he was no longer the ignored man he once was. He positioned himself at the front of the table, where the leaders usually sat. This wasn't just a physical act. It was a demonstration of leadership. Without needing to raise his voice, he now dominated the room with his presence. There was something almost theatrical about his movements, as if he were acting out the moment of a major twist in a movie. And in a way, it was. The executives, who until then felt confident in their decisions, now began to question themselves. Each sentence from Andre disarmed them a little more. He brought numbers, facts, concrete examples of what he had observed, and most importantly, he spoke with a calmness that hid an inner strength. It was as if he knew the battle was already won before it even started. The prejudice he had faced before was no longer relevant. Now the focus was on what he had to offer. His voice was a call to reality, a shattering of expectations that no one had predicted. As Andre spoke, the looks around the room began to change. Initial skepticism gave way to growing curiosity. Every solution he proposed was like a piece of a puzzle that others couldn't see. Andre was setting the perfect stage for a transformation. His words were filled with altruism. It wasn't just about him, but about the future of everyone there. The power of his ideas was in their simplicity. He didn't need grand gestures or complex speeches. What he said had weight in itself. The turnaround he had been waiting for was finally happening. The CEO, Carlos, who had previously completely ignored Andre, was now visibly uncomfortable. He tried to interrupt, but Andre raised his hand in a calm gesture, silencing any attempt at resistance. There, in that gesture, was all the authority he needed to command the situation. It was a moment of assertiveness that took everyone by surprise. Andre didn't need to shout to be heard. He didn't need to impose his presence with arrogance. He had overcome that need. His leadership spoke for itself, and at that moment, the CEO realized he had lost control of the meeting. With the confidence of someone who knew exactly what he was doing, Andre explained his proposal for change. He was not just there to criticize, but to transform. It was a call for everyone to rethink the way they were running the company. Andre knew that true success didn't come from quick, superficial measures, but from profound transformation. He talked about inclusion, about the need to hear all voices, especially those who were underestimated. His message wasn't just a suggestion, it was a challenge, an invitation for everyone there to rethink their own attitudes. With Andre's every word, the executives were being disarmed. The prejudice that once dominated the environment was slowly being undone. The clarity with which Andre presented his ideas made everyone begin to see what was before their eyes from the beginning. It was no longer possible to ignore him. He was redefining what it meant to be a leader. The respectful silence that followed each sentence showed that they had finally understood the scale of what was happening. Andre had asserted himself, and now everyone had to deal with this new reality. But Andre knew this was just the beginning. The reveal of his new position as CEO was yet to come, and he was about to throw it on the table like the last card in a game already won. What he had built up to that point was more than just a demonstration of competence. It was a lesson in humility, both for him and for others. He knew that moment would mark the beginning of a new era for the company, and not just because of his leadership position, but because he was willing to guide everyone along a path of true transformation. Suspense remained in the air, and then, with a slight smile, Andre finally revealed what everyone needed to know. He was the new CEO. The shock was immediate, but Andre didn't wait for reactions. He continued speaking, stating his vision for the company's future, a vision based on inclusion, humility, and overcoming. Now, he wasn't just changing the course of a meeting. He was changing the course of an entire company. Executives, who had previously ignored him, were now on the verge of drastic change. And Andre knew this transformation wouldn't be easy, but he was ready to lead every step of the way. After the impact of his revelation, the room fell silent again, but this time it was a different silence. It was the kind of silence that precedes a transformation. Andre looked around, each executive now hanging on every word he said. He no longer needed to assert his position, but rather challenge everyone there to see what really mattered. It wasn't just about numbers or results, but about people. And that was exactly what Andre was about to transform, the culture of that company. He knew that true changes start from within, and inclusion would be the foundation of this new phase. He started talking about diversity, not as a buzzword, but as a real and urgent need. Andre used concrete examples, showing how the lack of inclusion was directly affecting the company's performance. How many ideas have been ignored because they came from people who don't fit the standard? He asked, his voice resonating in the room. No one responded, but the expressions on the executives' faces indicated that the question hit home. It was an invitation for everyone to reflect on how prejudice had blinded the company to the true potential that was there all along. Andre knew that the transformation he proposed would not be easy. Resistance was expected, especially in a company so rooted in its traditional practices. He looked directly at Carlos, the former CEO, and paused significantly. "We need re-education," he said calmly, "not just in terms of business strategy, but in the way we see and treat people." It It was a bold proposal, but Andre was determined. He knew that, for real change to happen, it would be necessary to reformulate from the ground up, and this would begin with collective re-education. Andre's selflessness was clear when he spoke about the future. It was not a transformation he proposed just to improve financial results, but to create an environment where all voices were heard. He knew that the success of a company did not just depend on its leaders, but on each employee, on each person who was part of that team. Great ideas don't always come from those at the top, he said. Sometimes the solutions we seek come from the people we least expect. That was the heart of his message. Everyone had something to offer, as long as they were given the opportunity. Andre's words began to resonate on a deeper level. The transformation he proposed was not just about internal policies or training. It was a change of mentality, revolution in the way people interacted within the company. He spoke with passion, but also with a calmness that inspired confidence. With each new sentence, executives felt their responsibility grow. Andre wasn't just asking for a change in behavior. He was asking for a change of heart, and that required humility, something that many there still needed to learn. Andre's examples were clear and direct. He cited cases of companies that, by implementing an inclusive culture, saw their profit margins increase and talent retention grow significantly. But he didn't stop there. The real question is not just how much we can earn, but how much we can grow as human beings. He made a point of highlighting that, to achieve this transformation, everyone would need to be willing to give up old beliefs and deep-rooted prejudices. It was a journey of overcoming, not only on a business level, but also on a personal level. Andre knew that not everyone would be ready for this change. He could feel the hesitation of some, but that was exactly what he wanted to address. Change begins with discomfort, he said, his voice taking on a more serious tone. If we don't feel uncomfortable with our own limitations, we will never be able to overcome them. The room was silent again, but this time, it was a silence filled with reflection. Everyone there was being confronted with their own flaws, and Andre was offering a path to redemption. The transformation would be painful, but necessary. The challenge was launched. Andre wasn't there to make empty promises. He knew that the transformation he was proposing would be long, full of obstacles, but the results would be profound. He asked for everyone's collaboration, not with words of cheap motivation, but with a genuine conviction that the company's future depended on it. If we are not able to transform ourselves internally, how do we expect to transform the market abroad? The question hung in the air, like a call to action. It was time for everyone to truly commit to change. At the end of his speech, Andre looked at each of the executives, not with superiority, but with the humility of someone who has already been through what they were about to face. He knew the path would not be easy, but he also knew that once the transformation began, there would be no turning back. Change doesn't start with strategy, he said. It starts with people. And with that, he took a step back, allowing the words to echo in the minds of everyone present. They were faced with a choice: embrace the transformation or continue on the old path. The suspense of what would happen next was in the air. The executives were silent, absorbing Andre's words. There was no longer any way to deny that something profound had changed. The room that had once been filled with prejudice and indifference now looked different. It was as if the environment had changed along with them. Andre had planted the seed of a new era, an era of inclusion and respect, where the true value of people would finally be recognized. He knew that the transformation he proposed would not happen overnight, but that moment marked the beginning of a journey with no return. Andre no longer needed to prove anything. His presence in the room was enough to make it clear that he was in charge. But contrary to what many expected, he did not use this position to impose himself. On the contrary, he was humble, willing to listen, willing to build a new corporate culture that was truly inclusive. We can't move forward as a company if we keep repeating the same mistakes, he said, calmly but firmly. Inclusion is not just a nice word in a speech. It's a daily practice. And with that, he invited each of those present to be part of this change. The executives looked at each other, some still processing the magnitude of what was happening. Andre knew that not everyone was ready for this new reality, but he also knew that the true leader is the one who guides even when there is resistance. This is the time for us to create something new, he continued. his voice now charged with inspiration. The time has come to recognize that diversity is our greatest strength. Each of you has the opportunity to lead this transformation. What previously seemed like an ordinary meeting now became a milestone in that company's history. The new era that Andre envisioned was not just made up of diversity policies and training. He knew that the real challenge would be changing mentalities, transforming the way people saw each other and related to each other within the company. And most of all, he knew it would take a concerted effort to make this vision a reality. It's not enough to intend to be inclusive, he said. We need to act. We need to create an environment where everyone feels valued and respected, regardless of their background or appearance. The altruism of his words touched everyone present. Carlos, the former CEO, finally broke his silence. He was visibly shaken, but there was something different about his posture. Andre, I made a mistake, he began, his voice shaking. I didn't see what was right in front of me. I let my prejudices blind me. Carlos' words echoed around the room, but this time, there was no judgment, just acceptance. Andre knew this was the first step towards real change. It's not about pointing out blame, Andre replied, with admirable serenity. It's about learning from our mistakes and doing better going forward. The atmosphere in the room started to change. It was as if the resistance was dissipating, giving way to a new sense of purpose. Andre continued speaking, this time with renewed energy. He knew it wouldn't be easy to implement the changes he proposed, but he also knew he wasn't alone. The new era of inclusion we are building is not just about business, he said. It's about people, about how we can grow together, overcome our differences, and build something greater. The inspiration in his words was palpable, and he could see in the faces around the table that his ideas were beginning to resonate. The other executives began to speak out, some shy, others more confident, but all with the same feeling that something fundamental had changed. Louisa, the operations director, was next to speak. We need more women in leadership roles, she said, breaking the ice. And not just women, but people from different backgrounds, with different perspectives. Andrew smiled. That was exactly what he expected to hear. Inclusion was beginning to be seen as an opportunity, not a burden. And it was this change of mentality that he wanted to promote from the beginning. Andre knew that the real transformation would begin outside that room, in daily decisions, in small attitudes that, when added together, would make a difference. He didn't expect everyone to change overnight, but every step toward inclusion would be a significant step forward. True leadership, he said, is recognizing the value in everyone around us and creating the conditions for that value to flourish. The humility with which he spoke contrasted with the magnitude of his vision. He did not see himself as a savior, but as someone who was willing to be part of a larger process of transformation. By the end of his speech, Andre knew the work was just beginning. The new era of inclusion that he was proposing would require effort, dedication, and, above all, commitment from everyone involved. But he also knew that the first steps had been taken. The company was at an inflection point, and now it was up to each person present to decide if they were ready to embrace this new reality. Andre took a deep breath, feeling the weight of responsibility on his shoulders, but also knowing that, for the first time, he was surrounded by people who, like him, believed in a more inclusive future. Now that you've seen how Andre turned a toxic environment into an opportunity for growth, I ask, what will you do with this lesson? How many times have you caught yourself judging someone based on their appearance or position? Maybe it's time to reflect and start acting differently. The true leader is not the one who dominates, but the one who listens, includes, and inspires others. Are you ready to be part of this change? Are you willing to face your own biases and lead with empathy and inclusion? The big question is, how can you apply this to your life? Maybe it's at work, at home, or even in small daily interactions. The key to success is recognizing the value of the people around you and creating opportunities for everyone to grow. It's time to act. Get started now. If you want to continue learning and evolving, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. We have lots of other content that will inspire you to be a better leader, to overcome yourself, and, who knows, to create your own turnaround. Let's go on this journey of transformation together.